What's up, guys? This is Arth. Today we have all of rank 5 for you. This will probably be the last rank where I put all the bosses on the same video because fights are starting to get a lot more intricate, but we do have all 4 bosses here for you today. What you're seeing me do right now is I'm switching my pet to ferocity instead of tenacity, so he's going to be a DPS pet now. I'll get into why in a second. This is for the first boss fight in rank 5, Milliwatt. So I do want to say before I do this fight, as it teleports me down into it, I had been kind of going with the I'm not going to read Strats formula. I'm just going to figure out these fights as I go along, and I'm starting to realize that that's not going to work long term here with some of these harder fights, because this fight in particular I tried quite a few times and there were some wipes, and I had no idea what I was doing wrong until someone explained it to me, and that's sort of when it dawned on me that okay, yeah, I'm gonna have to know some things going into the fights. I can't just figure it out on the fly. So she has these void zones. They're easy to avoid and you want to stay out of them for the most part, except for, and your pet can eat them. You see my pet standing in it. Except for she has a discombobulator ray. It's basically a transmog ray that turns you into a chicken, and if you get caught by it you have to jump in the electricity portal to take some damage, and that breaks the buff, or that breaks the transmog, and you turn back into yourself. She actually cast it on my pet, and what had been happening was it kills your pet, and you can't bring him back up, and then I was dying because I couldn't DPS her down quickly enough. So what I did was I made my pet ferocity, and when he died from the transmog, shortly after the transmog he died, I brought him back with Heart of the Phoenix, which is an instant B-res on your pet. So I brought him back up. You see he dies here at the very end of the fight a second time from the transmog ray. So it killed him a second time, but by the time she casts it a second time, she's going to be close to dead, so it's a lot easier to kite her around at that point. Now, I've seen people do this without their pet having aggro. That's certainly possible, but if your pet is going to have the aggro and tank her, you're going to want your pet in his DPS spec so that you can use Heart of the Phoenix to bring him back up. But yeah, with Millie, I've seen people just kind of kite her around and then jump in the electricity pools just as she's about to cast the transmog ray. This fight was by far the easiest of this rank. They didn't have any problems with it whatsoever. It's for Joel. He's an undead guy. Basically all he does is he's got a couple abilities that pull you like that and push you in an attempt to get you into these fire void zones basically, and all you gotta do is avoid them. My pet's taking some damage here, but he's still in, my pet's still in his DPS spec, so he's not even taking that much damage, and Fajol's dead and I've barely taken any damage whatsoever. So just avoid the void zones and really you should be okay. Now, I read a strat on that fight before I went in, and it was super easy, so I thought, oh, okay, maybe it was just Milliwatt. Maybe I don't have to read strategies anymore. Maybe I can get away with it for a while again. And I go into this next fight, and you'll see that the next fight I'm going to show you is actually a wipe, because of the same thing, because of an ability that you need to interrupt that I didn't know about until I read a strategy. So once you get to a certain point, you're going to need to know these fights inside and out before you go in, because they are a lot more complex, or there's mechanics that are going to be hard to figure out on your own. So this is Proboscis. There's 2 things that he does. One is called Torrent, which he's casting right now. That's the one that you have to interrupt, and that's the one that I didn't know about. So Torrent destroys my pet, so it's just me. And then you got to avoid these things. This is called Rain Dance, and there's just some void zones that you have to avoid. I didn't do a good job of that either, but I was probably going to die anyway because I hadn't interrupted Torrent. Depending on your DPS, he'll cast Torrent every 2 or 3 times, or 2 or 3 times during the fight. I think he only cast it twice for me. My interrupt silencing shot is on a 20-second cooldown, so he doesn't cast it that often. So pretty much any class with an interrupt, you're going to be okay. That said, you may need silencing shot. Isn't a default talent, it's spec for, so you may need it for this fight. I'm not quite sure how I would have done it otherwise. So here's Torrent, he's channeling it, and there's me interrupting it, so we're okay for a while. My pet stays alive for longer. At this point in the first fight, my pet had already been dead for quite a while. Now my pet dies again here, but at that point I kind of know what I'm doing. And you can honestly kite this boss. It's not that big a deal. I kind of run around for a while, I think I dropped some traps. Maybe that's on the next fight. But you just got to avoid these falling things and an interrupt torrent, which I did one more time right here. So that was it, just a lot of running after my pet was dead. It was relatively easy, didn't come close to the enraged timer. But again, you do have to know the fight mechanics, so I've kind of waved the white flag on what I said initially, where I was just going to go into these fights and figure it out as I go along, because at this point the fights are getting too difficult and I'm going to waste a lot of my time if I try to figure out every mechanic on my own instead of reading about the boss's abilities. This last fight, I knew what the fight was. It's 5 of these guys, so okay, misdirect, and I get a multi-shot and glaive toss in. I also have thunder stomp on my pet, who's back in his tank spec. So I shouldn't have had my pet in his tank spec, but I didn't know that. So I killed the first of these 5 very quickly because, you know, your initial burst is really good. The second one's going down pretty quickly here too. My pet's starting to take a lot of damage. These 5 guys stack. They put a stacking dot on you that does increasingly more damage. And the more of them that are alive, the more they're going to stack it on you. So my pet's eating these stacks right now, and he's taking quite a bit of damage. But I'm DPSing these guys down, and I'm not too worried. 2 of them are dead. Here I pull one of them to me. I want to try to keep my pet alive. So I'm just kind of kiting around. I put some traps down here in a second. And I'm not too worried about things. I'm not taking a ton of damage. I still have a health stone. I can do a healing potion. So there's some options. What I didn't realize about this fight is that it's also an enraged timer fight where a lot of people don't make it before the 2-minute enrage. So I kill this next guy, Wheezy. They're all like Sleazy, Greasy, Wheezy. They're all rhyming names. So I decided to just sit here and eat some stacks for a while to up my DPS. And right about now is when I start to get the realization that these guys aren't dead yet, and I'm getting close to the enrage. Now you'll see here in a second, there it goes. The floor starts firing up. That means you have 30 seconds left. So at this point I'm worried. And this is the last guy, and I'm DPSing him down, but it's going pretty slow. Obviously after the burst, my DPS isn't quite as good. So you see here the meteors on the left hand side, that's actually the enrage. And I kill him just as the meteors are hitting me. So I finished the fight. It was successful, but just barely. And had I known that the enraged timer was going to be an issue, I would have come a little bit more prepared. This was my last fight of the night. I was only going to try it once, and if I didn't clear it, I was going to try it a different night. So I didn't have my full buffs. My pet was in his tank spec. He was tenacity, not ferocity, and there would have been a little bit more of a fire under my ass had I known that the enraged timer was going to be such an issue. But I made it through. It was a little sloppy, but I got there. So you might want to try to do some kiting, but you really want to burst 1 or 2 of them down in a hurry because you don't want too many stacks of that stacking debuff, and you really need to kill them in a hurry because for a lot of people the enraged timer is going to be an issue. Okay, that's the end of rank 5. I hope to have rank 6 up soon. Thanks for staying tuned. I hope you have a lot of luck with these bosses, and we'll see you soon.